There are two life-bearing worlds in the Romulus system, Catalogue and Quill. However, the presence of life on these worlds is all they have in common. The last episode of the Quill Catalogue left us off 1 billion years ago, when Quill was an ocean world. Dark, hazy, stormy, but teeming with life. In this episode, we'll jump to 900 million years in the past. Within that 100 million year time span, Quill has lost half of its atmosphere, now only having around 11% of Earth's air pressure at sea level. As Quill begins losing its atmosphere, it'll also lose its oceans. Now, 900 million years in the past, the first islands have been exposed, setting a new stage for Quillian life. So yeah, this video is going to be about the origins of Quillian land life. But in order to think about the evolution of land life on Quill, we have to first ask the question of what incentives are there for Quillian lifeforms to evolve onto land in the first place? Life on Earth evolved onto land to exploit the new land. Unlimited resources, unlimited space, and no predators. Microbes would unsurprisingly be the first to colonize land, but during this time, plants and subsequently animals depended heavily on their aquatic environments. They would eventually evolve adaptations to live a semi-aquatic and eventually a terrestrial lifestyle, but only after billions of years since the bacteria colonized land. So, looking back at Earth's history, macroscopic organisms took their sweet time to evolve onto land. In contrast, Quillian organisms might not even get the choice. As Quill's oceans continue to evaporate, the first land that'll appear on Quill would be in the form of volcanic islands. Volcanic islands that were previously underwater volcanoes and hydrothermal vents. Hydrothermal vents on Earth are home to a whole host of chemosynthesizers, so I wouldn't be surprised if Quill had them as well. However, as Quill's oceans evaporate and the sea level drops, the peaks of those underwater volcanoes will be exposed, alongside the chemosynthesizers. Therefore, the first land life on Quill would be chemosynthesizers originating from hydrothermal vents. I imagine that tides and waves would make the transition a little easier, but those hydrothermal chemosynthesizers are very specialized for aquatic environments. Once they make the transition to land, I imagine their capabilities and their morphologies would be significantly reduced compared to their aquatic ancestors. I'm thinking microbial mats at most, but their domination of land would be short-lived. Soon after the colonization of chemosynthesizers, photosynthesizing algae and bacteria will join the party. According to some papers, photosynthesizers around red dwarfs like TRAPPIST-1 would need to have very high levels of melanin in order to actually make photosynthesis viable. This isn't too surprising. I made this the case for photosynthesizers on Catalogue, so the same is going to be true for Quill algae. So if you're a microbiologist, things are getting pretty interesting so far. Microscopic chemosynthesizers, algae, all competing for land domination. But as those two are doing their thing, a third guy is gonna evolve, decomposing bacteria. Again, not a surprise, there's a lot of things that are gonna be dying on the land. Surely something is gonna evolve to take advantage of that useful organic matter. Now here's where I get to introduce something quite fun. Once decomposing bacteria evolved on Earth, they eventually developed a symbiotic relationship with photosynthesizing algae. The algae provided extra carbohydrates and energy from photosynthesis to the fungi, and in return, the filaments of the fungi provided structural and environmental support, as well as extra water and nutrients from the environment, creating what we call lichen. Something similar could evolve on the islands of Quill, but now there's a third player, the chemosynthesizing bacteria. Instead of fungal bacteria creating a symbiotic relationship with photosynthesizing bacteria, Quill decomposers will form a symbiotic relationship with the chemosynthesizers. Something, as far as I know, doesn't exist on Earth. Chemosynthesizers obviously break down the chemicals that make up their environment, so I'm gonna name this symbiotic creature the Spazoen, named after the Greek word for to break. So now we have the Spazoen, a symbiotic creature composed of chemosynthesizers and decomposers. And again, these don't exist on Earth as far as I know, so I have no idea what these will look like. Since the original chemosynthesizers were mainly microbial mats, I assume that the Spazoen will be pretty similar to those, or again, like lichen, just pretty simple little things. But that's something I'll have to think about, or something you'll have to think about. But it's around this time that macroscopic life will also find their way onto land. Also, not by their choice. In the previous episode, we discussed the large mass of floating plants that are floating on the ocean surface. These essentially living floating islands are home to a central ecosystem based on animals that are eating that plant mass internally. And for like hundreds of millions of years, these floating islands, which I have dubbed cruise ships, they've just been floating around aimlessly across the oceans, perfectly suited for the floating aquatic lifestyle. But the emergence of new land in the form of actual islands might get in the way of that. Quite literally. Soon enough, some cruise ships may end up stranded on these islands. There's no doubt that early on, tides may come into the islands and increase the chances of survival for these cruise ships. But there will be a time that these cruise ships will definitely need to evolve adaptations that would allow them to survive on land. Now here's the part where I kind of regret hand-waving the body plans in the previous video. The body plans for the plants in the previous video were the gaseous air bubbles at the top, the photosynthesizing layer below that, and everything else. That's all I said. But I feel like I can improvise a few things from here. The biggest hurdles you need to overcome when evolving onto land are retaining water and being able to breathe, exchange gases with the air around you. As well as the biggest one, gravity. To solve the issue of water transport and retention, I'm imagining just like extensive root systems at the bottom of the plant that'll reach towards the water, or like intertidal zones. Seems a bit too Earth-like, yeah, but convergent evolution exists for a reason. As for getting that water to the rest of the plant, well, that's pretty easy too. Again, these giant cruise ships, they are just layers of our basic plant body plan, which already have roots at the bottom of it. Since all of these layers are already stacked on top of each other, that means that their vascular systems are already all connected with each other, all inside the plant. And this water transport is made even easier due to the planet's lower gravity. I feel like that problem has been solved. Now let's get to the gas exchange problem, which is not really a problem at all, because again, taking a look back at the basic plant body plans, we already have parts of the plant that store air within them. Plant cells on Earth use an organelle called a stomata to exchange gas from the atmosphere to inside the plant. I imagine something like that evolved in Quill's plants much earlier to allow for the floating gas cells, you know what I mean. And as the plants evolve onto land, these may have evolved to become more efficient, maybe even developing a sort of waxy layer to prevent any further water loss, which would be amplified by the planet's lower atmospheric pressure. But in terms of the gas exchange problem, it was never really a problem in the first place. Alright, last but not least, we gotta talk about gravity. Whether or not you're floating in water or on top of the water's surface, that water will act as a cushion against gravitational forces, allowing organisms to grow a lot larger without any structural stresses or anything like that. Which is why some animals on Earth and the cruise ships of Quill could get as large as they can. But now that they're on land, it's gonna be a problem no matter what. However, I'm thinking of two caveats. One, Quill has lower gravity, so those stressors are gonna be weaker. And two, the air bubbles, which lower the density of the plant as a whole. I could still see some changes to the cruise ships as they get stranded onto land. For one, I could imagine they'd shrink in size to prevent from collapsing in on themselves, and some layers of the plant structure may harden, allowing for more further internal support. Of course, these cruise ships came with their own internal ecosystems, with animals living inside them. As such, these animals will become the first land animals. How would they adapt for land? Alright, here's the part where I admit that I kinda may have fucked up a little. Here is the early body plan for the fish, the Quill fish. As you can see, I only gave them one set of limbs. This obviously is a major lapse in my foresight, but I might as well introduce something interesting about this series. Whatever design flaws or mistakes or oversights that I make, starting now, or starting then I guess, cannot be changed. I cannot go back and change anything, so everybody's gonna have one pair of limbs. This is in stark contrast to the first land animal on Earth, which had two pairs of limbs. This is going to create huge differences in the dominant land life forms between Earth and Quill. For starters, I imagine it's going to be a lot harder for the Quill people to move around. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go back to the oceans. We talked about how the Quillfish's environment would be very low in visible light, and thus the Quillfish would have very primitive eyes, and would use other senses to observe the environment around them. One thing that I completely forgot about is electrosensitivity, sensing electrical signals from other creatures. And just because I forget something doesn't mean that it won't exist on Quill. That doesn't mean I discount it, I just straight up forgot. So yeah, some of the quillfish species would have electrode signal thingies. Some predatorial quillfish may evolve that sense into a sort of electric eel deal, producing an electrical signal that will shock or even kill their prey. I also brought up how the cruise ships and their internal ecosystems would leave a trail of falling, decaying organic matter that I have called snow brushes, named after the marine snow that falls in Earth's oceans. And someone in the comments of that first video brought up the fact that one of the quillfish species could evolve into large whale-like filter feeders. And yeah, there you go. In contrast to the Capitoline catalog, the Quill catalog is going to be a lot less in-depth, a lot more bare bones, brushing over very broad body plans instead of delving deeper into like specific species and adaptations. Whatever details that do make up Quill and its biology, that's sort of up to your guys and your imagination. And where better to start than these little guys finding land? And yeah, let's circle it back to the lack of locomotive limbs. Once the living cruise ships make their way onto land, whatever's living in their internal ecosystems, like the quillfish, will as well. And for a while at the beginning, they'll be flopping around struggling, especially with their external gills not receiving enough oxygen due to spending less time in the water. I imagine eventually the first proper land animals that we'll get will be akin to worms. Small little guys living within the wet soil. Probably a form of the quillfish that exhibits some neoteny, retaining some of their juvenile or larval traits into adulthood. Larger adult-sized quillfish are gonna need a lot more time in order to adapt to land, because of, again, their external gills. The tides will help with the transition, along with the planet's lower gravity, resulting in larger tidal zones. But as Quill's oceans disappear, their semi-aquatic lifestyle will have to change. And the first change that we'll see may be with those external gills. I have in my notes here, I put gill bubbles. I'm not sure what I meant when I wrote that, but I'll just improvise. So the whole point of external gills is to like extract dissolved oxygen in the water for breathing, right? Well, what if instead our quill creatures held on to some of that water in the form of bubbles or a pouch, similar to like marsupials, like kangaroos or whatever, that evolved from their external gills. These external gill pouches or bubbles will hold on to oxygenated water and use that oxygen until that water is fully anoxic. And then when they need to breathe again, they just dip into the water and fill their water reservoirs back up. And of course, these could evolve into something more efficient, something like microscopic air sacs or water sacs, and eventually maybe something that could extract oxygen straight from the air, sort of having the capabilities of a lung of some type. Their olfactory sensors are next to their external gills, so I'm just gonna make the quill creatures have like olfactory hairs at their rear ends too, with their gill pouches and gill bubbles on their undersides. Sounds fair enough to me. Now all I have to worry about is how they're gonna move. And I have a plan for that too. Let's back up to the quillfish again. I imagine one species of quillfish will have like a lamprey eel type of mouth with like ringed teeth and all that at the front side of it. And as the quillfish, including these lamprey eel mouth guys, unwillingly end up on land, they may use their advanced mouths to grip onto surfaces. This behavior may favor the existence of stronger mouth muscles and larger teeth, not only allowing for stronger grip, but much more effective predation. These more advantageous adaptations may favor the existence of larger head and mouth regions at the front, with the front mouth evolving finer muscle movements, effectively acting as front legs. The two sonar fins that were originally problematic will be pushed to the back, acting as back legs. Quill's land animals will be walking on their teeth. Let's also remember that Quill has a lower gravity than Earth does, meaning that it takes less force and energy to walk and stand. I imagine that aside from just crawling around on land, those two hind limbs would be used for jumping, and the front mouth limbs would be used for grabbing and stuff, latching onto surfaces as they land. Quill's first land animals are worms and jumping cockroaches. How cool. But would you look at that? Non-Earth-like conditions produce non-Earth-like life. Wow. But we'll have to see which of these creatures could survive in the near future. Hopefully they all stick around, because in the next episode, they'll be introduced to our first supercontinent. I'm recording these bits on June 20th. I am surprised it is already June 20th. Time is going too fast. That being said, I have started cataloging all the Hellworld submissions onto the website as of June 20th. You probably don't see them as of June 20th, probably at the time of me uploading this video. But trust me when I say this, I'm hard at work, okay? And once July is over, I'm pretty sure it's the end of July, things will maybe be back to normal. But other than that, thank you for watching, bye.